To discuss the real issues affecting Australia and New Zealand, this is Trad Tasman Talk, jointly produced by the Unshackled.net and the Mr. Berry Show. Now here are Tim Wilms and Stephen Berry, live from Melbourne.
Hello everyone and welcome to Trad Tasman Talk for another Friday night, coming to you an hour later. It is the 4th of November 2022. I'm Tim Wilms, Editor-in-Chief of the Unshackled here in Melbourne, where it is 7 p.m.
And I'm Stephen Berry, columnist for the BFD.co.nz, also here in Melbourne. No particularly interesting personal news for me, which is probably a good thing that we talk about news issues rather than ourselves.
Yes, there's been a lot that's happened during the week. Hello to everyone in the live chats. Kesho, our regular. We're not early. We technically are an hour late. I see that Granny Annie is back in the live chat. Good to see you. And so is Lady of Charlotte, and we've got I notice a new name in the chat, Chris Thompson. Watch redacted. Crazy New Zealand. Well, we're going to get into that because well, it's sort of a election special where obviously it's the formal Victorian election campaign now. Was kicked off Melbourne Cup Day, and Jacinda Ardern facing the polls in around about a year's time. It's normally convention that New Zealand Prime Ministers announce at the beginning of an election year when the election date is going to be.
Yeah, since Helen Clark was Prime Minister, she became PM in '99. So yeah, it was pretty much a convention since the start of 2002 that New Zealand Prime Ministers give plenty of notice of when the election date's going to be. Of course, she's already facing something of an election next month with a by-election, but we'll talk about that later.
Well, we'll start, as we always do, with the health report, and there's another COVID wave that we're told is underway, and we got this PSA from the New South Wales Chief Health Officer, Dr. Kerry Chant, warning us and telling us what we should be prepared for.
I'm here today with a quick COVID update for you to make sure you know what we know. We're starting to see an increase in COVID cases and changes in the variants circulating in New South Wales, which tells us that we're entering the next COVID wave. By looking at all the local information we have and what's happening overseas, we believe COVID cases will rise in the coming weeks. The protection the New South Wales community has from vaccination and previous infection continues to reduce the risk of severe illness. However, the elderly and those with underlying health conditions will continue to be at higher risk. BA4 and BA5 Omicron continues to be the most common variants. However, we are seeing a rise in XBB, BQ1.1 and the BA2 sublineages. So what can you do? Make sure you're up to date with your vaccinations. This is your best protection, including against the latest variants. Know if you would be recommended to have antiviral medication if you get COVID, and if so, have a plan for how you're going to get tested and how you're going to get those antivirals as soon as possible. As we go through this next wave, we can all do a few things that can protect the vulnerable, including the elderly and those with underlying health conditions. I urge people to stay home if they have any cold or flu-like symptoms and get tested for COVID-19. Staying home and away from places where there are people at higher risk, such as at hospitals and aged care facilities, when you have COVID or any symptoms, is essential. I'll keep you up to date over the coming weeks as we know more. Our weekly data report that's released every Thursday has more detail for those that are interested. Please work with us to keep yourself, your loved ones, and the community safe. Thank you.
Well, I suppose it's a relief that we're only getting advice now and not new orders to cover our faces up, etc. But there is precedent.
Yes, obviously, Victoria, there's not the pandemic declaration anymore. We have probably the worst show in the country, Brett Sutton, who's obsessed with masks. You'll notice there that Kerry Chant didn't mention masks at all. I did enjoy the XYZ's coverage. Kerry Chant shaves moustache, warns of imminent COVID megadeath. Well, she did also ditch the glasses as well, which infamously broke during one of the New South Wales press conferences there. And up in Queensland, their chief health officer there, Dr. John Gerard, whose emergency powers have been wound back, so he can't order lockdowns but can mandate masks. He's brought back a traffic light alert system, which New Zealanders will be so familiar with. So,
yes, well, New Zealand only ever got to orange. Nobody ever got green, and then they scrapped it.
Yeah, so Queensland is currently at green, so it's stay home if you're sick, stay up to date with your vaccinations, take a RAT if you get COVID-19 symptoms, and if you get COVID-19, it suggests, because it's no longer mandatory, isolation.
I guess rare bit of credit for Dan Andrews is that the pandemic rules have actually probably prevented more regulations coming into place, with the chief health officer being stripped of those powers.
Yes, that was one of the silver linings about the new pandemic orders legislation. Now, for those who are wondering, who can't keep up with these various Omicron subvariants lineages, it's nearly the 1 year anniversary of Omicron, which was actually a blessing that we had this super infectious, milder variant, and there has been no variant since. It's just been all the children and grandchildren of Omicron. So according to Dr. Emma Hodcraft, XBB is a recombinant of BJ.1, which is BA 2.10.1.1 and BM 1.1.1, which is BA 2.75.3. 1.1.1.1, both are descendants of BA2.
Why have they stopped giving them the what was it, Greek alphabet names now?
Because apparently they're not distinctive variants. They all come from the Omicron tree. It seems that Omicron is the ultimate boss variant, and BQ 1 and 1.1 is descended of BA5. Kisho says people that use so many subsections in a report that are a nuisance. Now, I mentioned that the COVID zealots and mask fetishes were very upset that Kerry Chant did not mention masks in a PSA, and that John Gerard is only suggesting masks when the light gets to red. It's only recommendation advice that you wear a mask indoors. At Amber, it's only wear a mask if you on public transport, or if you're around somebody who's vulnerable in healthcare settings. So they were reassured, the COVID alarmists, when they saw Australia's biggest doomer when it comes to COVID, who's got who's been the most wrong with her predictions throughout the pandemic, Professor Raina McIntyre on ABC News Breakfast, promoting her new book, Dark Winter.
Good morning, Lisa.
Hey, it's interesting you're wearing the face mask because you know what? I read the chapter called The Fuss about face masks, and it was pretty interesting just to think back on the different attitudes and how long it took us to actually realise that COVID could be transmitted via air, that it was airborne.
Yeah, it was really, really sad that it took so long to prevent a preventable infection by just a simple measure such as a mask at a time when we didn't have vaccines.
Did you must have felt pretty frustrated at the time, because I know we were very grateful to have your expertise on our program as often as we did. You write in the book about being on call to pretty much every media organisation around the world, but there were a lot of missteps and a lot of decisions that would have no doubt now upset you at the time. Reading your book, I could understand why, given your background and what you felt you knew.
Yes and no. I mean, it's always frustrating to see preventable infections occurring, and but Australia did pretty well at the beginning of the pandemic, actually. It was more the global narrative that masks didn't work and that, there was a... But it's actually a very long historical issue, the issue of denial of airborne transmission of just about every respiratory virus, including influenza. And, there's what I explore in the book is some of the ideological and other reasons for that. It's almost like a cult, this belief in, this denial of airborne transmission.
I'm surprised.
If that interviewer had just eaten a bowl of her shit, that probably would have been about
Yeah,
the
she
same
kept a
sort of-
straight face, Lisa Miller. Like, I'm surprised that she did that. And Raina McIntyre is not in the same studio as Lisa Miller there. She's in an ABC studio, but like separately, but she still wears a mask. Now, she describes, this cult that, masks don't work for respiratory viruses. She clearly is projecting and has no self-awareness, given that.
Even the most general mainstream COVID zealots these days will at least qualify their position on masks by saying particular ones don't work as well as, say, the N95.
Oh, but they still say any mask is better than no mask. Basically, the thought or the compliance that counts. Now, despite
But we know that's not the case. In fact, if
Yeah.
you were to use a scarf, you would risk actually increasing the size of the droplets which escape your mouth.
And now, despite her being such a mask enthusiast, she has had COVID 3 times this year. The first time, she says she got it from being in the car with her daughter. The second time is when she appeared at a public event in the Opera House, which was it's never been it's now the best time. It's never been such a good time to be a virus. And when she was on the stage, she took her mask off, she claimed, because it interfered with the lapel mic. And she apparently, COVID just went from the crowd and just attacked her unmasked face on stage, and so she got COVID from that. And she said recently she got COVID a third time from another family member in her home as well. And yeah, she has been in her bedroom for most of the past 2.5 years. She even cuts her own hair, which it looks like it's a bit of a mess.
I think we can all be grateful that she wears a mask that much, actually.
Except that, there's people that listen to her and think that she's one of the best experts in the world and will buy her book, Dark Winter.
I just don't know how you catch COVID 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we're both still COVID virgins. I mean, we've been around people who've had COVID, but it's it's never infected us. Well, we've never tested positive.
Maybe we've built up an immunity and she's destroyed hers by constantly staying in the house by herself and wearing a mask all the time.
Now, when COVID first came in March 2020, like she did buy into it that it was like transmitted through surfaces. Remember, like everyone wore gloves and like you had to pack your own bags at the supermarket. She suggested that people wash their fresh vegetables in soap in case they'd been handled by COVID infected people along the way.
Oh my God, that's, I've had McDonald's that tasted like soap once because someone obviously cleaned the surface of the bench and then didn't wipe it down properly. And halfway through my burger, my lips were starting to numb. So, yeah, that's really bad advice.
Now, as Kerry Chant and John Gerard said in their advice and alert systems, respectively, they're still encouraging people to be up to date with their vaccinations, which obviously most of the vaccine mandates now have been reviewed. It's now largely voluntary for those outside of health and aged care. But when they were pushing the vaccines based on the health experts, this is from last week, that Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, ATAGI, said that they did not know the heightened risk of a heart condition called myocarditis from COVID vaccines until 5 months after they were approved for the public. Yet they knew about blood clots from AstraZeneca almost immediately and warn young people against taking it. So, and
you consider that the previous fastest vaccination invented was for mumps, and that took 4 years.
And the vax injuries continue to pile up. What is it? It was noted in the Australian budget that 77 million had been set aside for compensation for the COVID vaccine injured and paying for funerals for those who had died. And in the BFD, Lushington D. Brady, who's an Australian but lives in New Zealand, mentions the story of Faith Ranson.
Yeah, and she's essentially been crippled by the COVID vaccinations. She has daily seizures as a result of it.
Yes, which is just shocking. And as a teenager, she would be at one of the lowest risk people to develop a severe case of COVID.
Yes, and now she's been diagnosed with functional neurological disorder. So that affects the function of the nervous system with how the brain and body send and receive signals. Symptoms include limb weakness, seizures, spasms, chronic pain, and bowel and bladder symptoms. There is rehabilitation treatment, but it's very, very slow, very unpleasant.
Though obviously prevention, like not being forced as a young healthy person to take the jab, would have prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she wasn't in a group that was identified as being at risk at all. There's no reason for her to take it. But of course, the government across the world decided that everybody's got to have their 2 jabs or they can't function. And now she can't function.
Now there is still a backlog in the various state courts to deal with those COVID criminals who breached the stay-at-home orders, and one of the most famous is known as the People's Premier, TikTok comedian John Bernard Koritz. So he shot to mainstream prominence when he received leaks from New South Wales Health about the daily COVID case numbers during the 2021 lockdown, and he claimed that this was due to some mathematical method that he and his brother had developed, and eventually they flushed out the mole, the New South Wales health authorities, and he reported a wrong number, which he claimed, they've decided to ruin my mathematical equation. So he spoke at the Sydney lockdown protest to tell a crowd of 3,500 that all we want is freedom. The magistrate Emma Menea was not amused. It does not, from his conduct and the words he says, come across as a joke. And said if he's not encouraging the crowd, what is his purpose? So he was found guilty of encouraging people to breach the pandemic restrictions on people for gathering outdoors, which was always the safest place for them to be, outdoors. It's virtually impossible to catch COVID outdoors. So he got a 2-year good behavior bond and no conviction was recorded. The magistrate said,
of course, he could say all those things again now. He could go and say those exact same things again now in public, and he wouldn't be breaching his good behaviour bond.
Yeah, magistrate said.
I sympathise with people who get cancelled because they attempt stand-up comedy.
The magistrate said Corazzi had already been punished by vicious racist comments on social media. So the magistrate's saying that racist, a person being subjected to racist comments is an okay form of punishment for a crime. That seems quite messed up. One person had wished Koretz catch COVID-19 and die, while another called him a dirty fucking Arab and told him to fuck off to your shitty country or kill yourself. We don't want you here.
Well, nobody tell that to people who go to court for beating their children to death, that racist comments can be considered a punishment.
He actually did get COVID during that Delta wave and was hospitalized briefly. So, but he's back to full health now, and he has bounced back. I mean, his Twitter and Instagram and TikTok content is utterly hilarious. He does the fake interviews with leading national and international figures. He does vox pops at various public events. He was at the Melbourne Cup and the Sydney Everest race, and he also MCs weddings and other public events. And he's also the host of the Barbecue Bulletin satirical recap.
Wow, he's doing very well for himself.
Yes.
What was probably the best thing that happened to him.
Even though he was supposedly cancelled for being a selfish person gathering in the safe outdoor air. Now, it's interesting that our governments at least haven't taken the suggestion of a columnist at the Atlantic, a piece written by author and economics professor Emily Oyster, that we should just have an amnesty for the pandemic madness, because she says that defending pandemic choices in the face of so much uncertainty, getting something right had a hefty element of luck, and similarly getting something wrong wasn't a moral failing. So treating pandemic choices as a scorecard in which some people racked up more points than others, preventing us from moving forward. Both sides were just as bad as each other, and we need to move on. And that
well, that's quite horrific. It's almost sounds like making excuses, which could have making excuses that could have been applied during the Nuremberg trials. Oh, everybody was doing it. They didn't know any better. Let's just have an amnesty and not punish people for inflicting totalitarianism on the entire populace and destroying lives.
Yes, I mean, maybe some war criminals in the future will use that defense. And I did notice in response to that column, Nuremberg 2.0 was trending on Twitter because Elon Musk has locked out all of the moderators. He's firing a lot of them today. So things that are trending, like in the trending thing, they're actually what people are talking about. It's not manipulated. Yes, Emily Oster is a bit fishy, I will admit there. And yes, yeah, there was this handy Atlantic then and now. So the Atlantic used to say the anti-vaccine right brought human sacrifice to America. Unvaccinated people need to bear the burden. Vaccine refusers don't get to dictate terms anymore. Some Americans no longer believe in the common good. But yeah, just
I never believed in the common good. The common good is always bad for the individual. But why would we have an amnesty for these behaviours in responding to COVID? Because the same behaviours are being used for just about every other problem that the government thinks governments can solve, such as climate change or poverty or the cost of living crisis. Every single response is more compulsion, more regulations, and more unintended consequences, which just violate individual liberty. So, no, nobody should be getting off the hook for the response to COVID because they're using the exact same bloody response to just about every other so-called human problem.
And we knew by April 2020 what COVID was. I was one of the people, okay, we flattened the curve for 2 weeks. Let's move on. So throughout 2020 and 2021, it was clear what the truth was. And looking at the place that didn't lock down, Sweden, it's got way less excess deaths over the 2022 period than Australia and New Zealand, who had COVID zero for both those years in 2022.
How do you have negative 0.5% excess mortality? Did people come back to life? Or was there an increased birth rate as a result of COVID lockdowns? Possibly. I guess there's nothing else to do when you're stuck at home, is there? Drinking rates went up as well as a result. So,
well, there is a time
lag
when you lock people up in their homes for the eventual collateral damage, whether it be immunity debt, social problems that have developed as time drags on.
Yeah, the mental health crisis that public health systems can't keep up with anymore, and not to mention the new behaviours which should have been incentivised by government so that people actually felt like that it was their duty and they were working for the common good by spying on their neighbours,
save lives. Well, let's move on to an election campaign where the incumbent, Premier Dan Andrews, would like the Victorian public to forgive and forget his COVID zero police state lockdowns for 2020 and 2021.
And people, unfortunately, I just don't see any way that he could avoid sleepwalking to victory. The Liberal Party is absolutely hopeless. They're going to have the guts ripped out of them by the Teal Independents. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more than 55 seats going to Labor in the lower house.
You've started to do a poll of polls for the Victorian state election. So, yes.
So based on the last 5 polls, so there's a couple of Roy Morgans in there, a couple of results.
Yeah, but I told you not to include Roy Morgan. Can you do like a poll of polls without Roy Morgan?
No, you can't. You can't.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
The point of the poll of polls is that it flattens out the stupid spike.
But we have heaps of polls here. Like, it won't hurt to make one which is
okay. Well, this one stretches back to the middle of September using the last 5 recent polls. So I felt it would lose value if we had to stretch back to August or July. In any case, on first preferences, Labor's on 38.8, Liberal and Nationals absolutely hammered, 29.7. The Greens are polling at 12.5%, and all others, including independents, are on 14. If we look at the two-party preferred, it's 58.4 versus 41.6. Incredibly, the coalition's promises in the election are about 10 times the cost of what Dan Andrews' government is promising too.
Yeah, I mean, promising $2 public transport. I mean, that'll cost huge amounts of other taxpayers' money who don't use public transport. Other taxpayers will lose from that, and also free lunches for school children.
Jesus Christ. I'm glad that I'm not eligible to vote, because we're facing the conundrum of an oppressive Labor government, which is probably to the right of the opposition.
And they had an election stunt this week. The Victorian Liberals, their Ditch Dan ambulance.
No beds in here, empty. We're going to send this ambulance on its way to see if they can locate any of those 4,000 beds. It's a call out. It's a call out. Where are those 4,000 beds, Daniel Andrews, that you promised us?
Now,
Wow,
I'm actually
that was crap.
They may actually get into trouble for this Ditch Janmobile because according to the Secretary of the Victorian Ambulance Union, Danny Hill, under the Services Act 1968, a person must not use the word ambulance service or any name, title, description to imply an association with an ambulance servant unless an association exists without written authority of the secretary. They just should have chosen a Mr. Whippy van and pretended it was an ambulance.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the legal issues, which sound absolutely ridiculous to me, the stunt is bloody stupid too.
Yeah, so like this,
watching them open the door and go, there we are, there's our damn ambulance. It's
because they're trying to battle the election, the Victorian Liberals, on traditional Labor and like left-wing issues like healthcare, public transport, and education as well. Basically, well, they're also committed to the net zero agenda as well. Now, despite the fact that Dan Andrews is ahead in the polls, he rarely goes out in public where the average punter is. They're all stage managed far away from the public, though. A heckler got in at a press conference in Caulfield today.
All right. What do you think we're announcing? You've worked it. Ah, there you go. Okay. Okay. We're right to go. Ah, there you go. Okay. Okay. We're right to go.
Do you remember when ScoMo got told to piss off somebody's lawn while he was doing a stand-up, and he just apologised and moved off the lawn, and it was hilarious?
Yes, and Scott Morrison also, he encountered an angry voter, and Scott Morrison was able to soothe him. Now, it's broken tonight that because he'd been refusing, well, he hadn't yet committed to any debates or people's forums, but he has agreed to the Sky News Herald Sun People's Forum, where he and opposition leader Matthew Guy will answer questions from undecided voters. So
that's very brave of him. I can't imagine
courageous.
Sky
Yes.
News and the Sun are is friendly territory.
Though it's become convention now in whether it be state and federal that both major leaders participate in Sky News People's Forum. I mean, obviously the people are vetted before they came in, the questions pre-approved. But yeah, like still anything could happen, and Sky News is already saying, nobody, can afford to miss this.
No, and I'm actually looking forward to it too. I'd like to see Dan a bit more uncomfortable.
Though the questions from the mainstream media haven't been much better for Dan the past 2 days, after the bike rider who his wife Catherine Andrews collided with in January 2013, then 15-year-old Ryan Mulman, he was very seriously injured when he collided with the Andrews car. Now, it was reported by I think it was by if I go down here, this is the Herald Sun report is paywalled, so I'm using the Sky News article. So he got $80,000 compensation from the Transport Accident Commission, but his family are now coming forward to say that they were basically told to be quiet, otherwise they wouldn't get the compensation. IBAC investigated the police response and found that officers failed to breathalyze Miss Andrews as any other motorist after an accident. And also, so there's Ryan in 2013, and there he is now. He's also claiming that the Andrews car was driving at speed, and now there's a witness, Jane Crittenden, who's broken her silence and said that the Andrews family were just staying down the road and didn't render assistance. And Dan was asked about this by the media yesterday, and yeah, it was just more stonewalling.
Do you ever wish to speak to him?
I've canvassed these matters in great detail, and I've got no further comment to make.
There have been no ongoing police investigations into that for some time. Have you ever felt the need to check in on him, given the extent of the injuries that he suffered as a result of that?
As I just said, Rachel, I've gone into great detail on numerous occasions, and I've got nothing further to say about the matter.
Do you have a message for him today?
As I said to you before, I've gone into great detail on numerous occasions about an incident that occurred now 10 years ago, and I've got nothing further to say.
He was a victim of that incident, and this is the first time he's gone into as much detail.
And that goes for a painful 2.5 minutes, but obviously not as painful as what Ryan went through. And I've just been alerted that Real Rukshan has just published an interview with the family on his channel. I haven't seen it yet. It must have been uploaded while we were just about to go to air. I'll certainly watch that there. But what is it? Of course, Rukshan's not a real journalist according to the mainstream definition of journalism, because he has, another job as a wedding photographer, and also because he's around far right people as well. So yes,
there's nothing wrong with him having a second job. It's pretty hard to make.
Well, that was his original job before Dan Andrews shut down the wedding industry. I mean, Rukshan, if there was no lockdowns, Rukshan wouldn't be doing his journalism job as well. Dan Andrews created him.
But I mean, yeah, it's very difficult to monetize creativity. And I know I've had a go at making an income out of journalism in a sense, and yeah, it's not easy.
And now it's also just broken on the Age this afternoon, because they were unable to publish another leaked IBAC probe known as Operation Daintree. It's the fourth investigation into the Premier and his office, but they were able to publish this story based on other sources. So just before the 2018 state election, there was 2 grants issued to the Health Services Union, which is being a union linked to Labor, worth $3.4 million, which was supposedly to train hospital staff to deal with violence against health workers. So yes, and IBAC has, its commissioner has recently complained about a lack of funding and resources. So, I mean, this is the thing. He's still ahead in the polls yet. Like, there's so much evidence of his of corruption in his government, cover-ups, nepotism.
Yep, and the opposite. What's even the point of an opposition which promises to outspend a socialist government by 10 to 1? Victorians are really being ripped off by the lack of options in this election.
Obviously, there are if you want to vote for a even greater paternalist than the Labor or the Greens, there are the Teals. Obviously, the most prominent Teal elected in Victoria was Monique Ryan, who's always hectoring about masks in Kooyong, and there's Teals in Hawthorn, Kew, Caulfield, Brighton, and Sandringham and Mornington.
And Caulfield is probably going to go Teal as a result.
Though Labor, they do want to win it as well. It's held by the Labor deputy leader, the guy who was with the Danmobile, David Southwick.
Yep, and since the boundary changes, I think the Electoral Commission has measured the buffer in there is about 0.6% in favour of Labor.
Yeah.
Since the previous election. And in the previous election, it was less than 1% majority for the deputy leader. So it doesn't look very promising.
Yes, the Teal candidate is former Labor Party member, like resigned 6 months ago, Nomi Kaltman. So she also is the head of a Jewish feminist group.
In fact, there are, everyone in the most recent debate were Jewish.
It's a Jewish seat, Caulfield.
Yeah, it's 26% of people in Caulfield are Jewish, which is not wonderful or terrible. It's just there was no need to mention it.
Coltman said that the Liberal Party could bring back the potential criminalisation of abortion.
Yeah, what a bullshit artist.
And Mr. Southwick said that religious freedom laws would not adversely affect the LGBTIQ community, but Miss Coltman disagreed. She accused Christian Mormons and Pentecostalists of bringing very scary fringe commission to the Liberal Party, which was not in line of the Caulfield residents.
I don't understand why you would want to force organisations that don't want to hire gay people to hire gay people. Is that going to be a nice work environment for people who get jobs that the people who employ them don't want them to have? That's ridiculous. And clearly the teachings of the church are anti-gay.
Well, on that matter, Andrew Thorburn, the brief CEO of Essendon, he was forced out. Dan Andrews called his Christian church, bigoted views, because it was pro man-woman marriage and pro-life. He's engaging lawyers for unfair dismissal, given he was basically told to choose between Essendon and being the chair of his church.
Yeah, well, if your church isn't bigoted and misogynist and homophobic, well, it's probably not a proper church anyway. Read the Bible. God, don't skirt around the issue. It's very, very clear.
And of course, on the matter of sport, at the beginning of the week, Dan Andrews gave the Australian Diamond netballers a $15 million Victorian taxpayers bailout to sponsor them as Visit Victoria, given that, well, Dan Andrews, he's mainly encouraged people to leave Victoria. There's now this outfit called Visit Victoria to get people to come back. So they're the new sponsor since they didn't want Gina Rinehart's Hancock prospecting money.
Ridiculous. I hate netball. Why should I pay for it?
Oh, well, nobody watches women's sports. I mean, like,
No.
Apparently it's the AFLW finals time. I haven't watched any of it.
Though I suppose netball is probably the only sport where people watch the women more often than they watch the men.
Yes, watch the women. But yes, there's now, what is it, AFLW and the women's cricket and NRLW. There's women's sports galore, but still nobody watches it.
No. And they still continue to complain about not getting paid as much as the men for doing the same job, which obviously they're not doing because they're not playing against men, which I think they would find a bit more difficult than what they're currently doing.
Now, it's clearly the case. The reason why New Zealand Labor Party candidates did badly at the local elections is because there's so many people who've been radicalized and become extremists because of disinformation. And so I noticed this week that there's a both in the New Zealand media and from your intelligence agency, the SAS, a campaign to make sure that disinformation and extremism is purged.
Well, and Jacinda, just in the last few days, made the claim that disinformation is one of the biggest concerns amongst New Zealanders. Absolute crap. A poll which came out yesterday, forgive me, I can't remember where it's from, shows about 60. The top issue for New Zealanders at 60% is the cost of living.
But according to your media, your
My media.
Well, you're still a New Zealand citizen.
Go on.
Yeah, so your like equivalent of ASIO is called the SIS. What does it stand for? Secret Intelligence Service or Security Intelligence Service? Yeah, so they have got a new extremism guide. So it's called Know the Signs. So this is the PDF here. So there's the scale of extremism. So the views on the fringe, they can be based on faith, social, or political beliefs that exist on the fringes of society outside the more broadly accepted views and beliefs of most people. Extremists seem to radically change the nature of government, religion, or society and create community based on their ideology. Sounds terrible. And they're also encouraging people to dob in their neighbours who exhibit extremist type behaviours.
Our Secret Service is launching an initiative to help us identify people who may have been radicalised.
Know the Signs details dozens of indicators that a friend or family member could be planning a terror attack. As Adam Hollingworth reports, the move comes as our spy chiefs identify a new and worrying type of terrorism.
Time was when the intelligence services were never seen, never heard. But now they're loudly proclaiming your country needs you to keep an eye on those you know and, if necessary, dob them in.
Recognising a potential warning sign and then alerting NZSAS or police could be the vital piece in the puzzle that ultimately saves lives.
To that end, they're publishing a guide called Know the Signs to help us all identify potential terrorists in our midst.
To pay attention and to be alert, so that if they see or hear about something that seems off, that worries them and concerns them, they might have a look at this information to say, does this indicate to me that this person is on the road to actually committing an attack?
The SIS has listed around 50 signs, from obvious ones, like writing on a weapon, as happened in Christchurch, to
a person who is really developing an us versus them worldview.
Authorities say they're usually closely monitoring 40 to 50 potential terrorists. These people used to be motivated by their white identity or by their faith. But in the past 6 months, a third group has emerged, those motivated by politics.
And so it could be the COVID measures that the government took, or it could be other policies that are interpreted as infringing on rights. And it's what I sometimes describe as a kind of hot mess of ideologies and beliefs, fueled by conspiracy theories.
The launch of the initiative Know the Signs is an indicator that the security services know that they can't do it alone. They need the help of the public. But to some, the guide is a first step only.
How do we upskill those people in our community who are much closer to people who might be potentially radicalised and get them to understand what it is they're seeing? That's our challenge.
Adam Hollingworth, News Hub.
Under the criteria that they've mentioned there, my time as deputy leader of the Libertarians Party in 2003 and 2004 means the SIS should have been watching me and the public should have been dobbing me in for promoting the Libertarians. Campaign, and what the hell is with her hair? That was very off-putting.
I think she's Jacinta's mother. I mean, there is a similarity, and I noticed that Cam Slater from the BFD noticed that Jacinda Ardern, she's developing a longer face with the stress of everything, and it's going to take a lot more airbrushing to make her look on billboards.
Well, they managed it for Helen Clark, and they didn't have a lot to work with there.
But there was more. So TVNZ, which it's a government-owned TV station, but it's funded by advertising.
Yeah. So TVNZ is publicly owned, but currently operates on a commercial, as a commercial entity. But what the Labor government is doing with TVNZ and Radio New Zealand, which is public radio with no ads and is extraordinarily boring and terrible, they're going to combine the two companies into an organisation called the Aotearoa Public Media at a cost of $380 million, which is more than the two entities themselves combined are worth.
So they aired a documentary called Web of Chaos, which featured, I didn't know of this disinformation project. They're researchers who are funded by the government. Yeah,
Byron Clark is probably the most infamous one. And he was a former Workers' Party candidate in the Christchurch mayoralty over a decade ago. And he was also instrumental in the harassment of Lee Williams, who lost his job at a company for his YouTube videos.
So this is a segment of what is some of the extremist propaganda that is put online.
You can draw people in lots of different places. And each of the platforms are used in different ways.
Hello, friends. As you can see, I'm working on my would-be bag.
What is known internationally as the kind of trad wife set of viewpoints, which is white, Christian, a lot of pseudo-Celtic, pseudo-Nordic ideologies behind it. They use Pinterest and Instagram to draw in other women who are interested in interior design, children's clothing, knitting, healthy food for children. And it does draw people in towards a set of white nationalist ideas. I mean, it's relatively easy to see. If you see a very beautiful, fair-skinned, blonde or red-haired child with beautiful braiding in her hair and some flowers, just step back a little bit. Which is really distressing because that's my heritage.
All cooking with the girls.
Wow, what a crazy bitch.
There's those a mothers groups at the local church. I mean, send in the SIS to monitor them, and maybe they're they're planning to raid Due again because Amy is the trad wife model. I mean, yeah, that's she could
if you want to stay home and have children and look after your family and
every time
socialize.
she appears on the show, she's radicalizing other women. Yeah, it reminds me there was this couple who appeared on this ABC News segment back in 2019, married to the alt-right, Justin and Lisa Bueller. And Lisa said that she joined the alt-right because she really liked baking. So yes, apparently radicalization also starts with baking cookies.
Or maybe straight wedding cakes.
Yes, I mean, yeah, like a good housekeeping magazine. That's a white nationalist propaganda now.
Well, Jerry Falwell was got an award from Good Housekeeping magazine. I wish I could remember what the award was.
Thankfully, your justice minister is going to draft some laws to crack down on the such hateful propaganda.
Yeah, she's
another
promised.
Topic of hate speech. Where are we at with that? I feel like this is a question we raise with the Justice Minister every time we talk.
Yeah, I can promise you, I will make this promise to you. I will be making announcements on hate speech by the end of this year. There are...
Does that give it enough time to come into law before the next election?
Yes.
So you're guaranteeing that will go through?
I guarantee that I'll be introducing law that I intend to have concluded and put into law by the next election.
Now, some people may recall the previous Justice Minister, Chris Farfoy, being absolutely grilled by Tova O'Brien on TV3 about hate speech laws, and he looked like a complete idiot. That was early last year, and by early this year, the government had still not made any progress on the hate speech laws. Kerry Allen, that was a softer interview than Farfoy's, but I watched the entire interview. She does appear competent.
So she is a she?
Yes, she is. She's a lesbian, which probably won't surprise anybody. But the impression I get from her is that she is competent. She is across the issues in her portfolio, and you do actually know what she believes and when she gets asked questions in an interview, which of course makes her extremely dangerous, because probably the best feature of this Labor government has been the sheer lack of people around the cabinet table that actually know how to implement anything they stand for. But it would appear that Ellen is actually somewhat capable.
Now we're already at the top of the hour, so I'm not sure. Do we want to basically ditch the rest of the program?
Shall we very quickly go through the Hamilton West by-election?
Is there much to report, really? I mean, it's not until December, and it's December 10.
December 10th, yes. Well, the exciting thing about it now is that we actually have a general idea of how the seat may end up going. There's been polling by Courier, which is a national poller, but this was commissioned by the ACT Party. It shows that currently National sitting on about 45% support in the electorate, Labor on 37%, ACT on 9%. Greens and New Zealand First don't appear they will have candidates, but the Greens are on just under 5%, New Zealand First about 3%. And the independent Gaurav Sharma, who triggered the by-election by resigning from Parliament and alleges enormous number of allegations about bullying by the Labour Party, he's polling at just 2.5%. Hamilton West, of course, is a bellwether electorate. It virtually always goes to the party which is in government. Though, of course, this being a by-election, it'll go to the party that's probably polling the best nationally, and that is the National Party.
And I might touch briefly on the announced retirement of the New South Wales Health Minister, Brad Hazzard. He managed to top Dan Andrews as the most grumpy authoritarian COVID response minister in Australia. He's been a career politician. Parliament 32 years. He's now 70 years old. He was originally a school teacher, then he became a lawyer. I mean, he comes across as a bastard school teacher when he was lecturing people, and this was one of the things that upset him with the backlash to his COVID lockdowns and orders.
Defaced your property. Somebody actually did deface the front lawn with the word tyrant right across it, and that was, yeah, it's pretty bad, very close to everything, really.
Oh, the poor thing. I hope he would have had to lie down and have a cup of tea.
I'm going to be working on, I'll have it ready by the time the New South Wales state election does take place, which is on March 25th, 2023. The polls have tightened with the coalition Perrottet government not too far behind now. I'll put together a compilation of his worst bad-tempered bits, because there was a lot of them there.
I look forward to that.
All right, we might wrap it up now, unless you've got anything that's on the agenda that you definitely want to add.
No, I think we've covered off very well.
Well, thank you everyone again for watching at this later time. So I'll be back with Due next Friday evening, back at 6 p.m. Melbourne time on the Unshackled YouTube channel, and I'll be back for Tim's News Explosion 8:30 p.m. Monday time on the Wilms Front channels, and there'll be more reports from Tiger Mountain coming out with Richard Wollstonecroft soon. Keep checking out the unshackled.net for our latest content. Good night, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trad Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman nations, visit the unshackled.net and rightminds.nz.